To any 911 call operators, what is the funniest 911 call you've ever had? A guy calls from a payphone to complain that he has a pipe wrench stuck up his butt and he needed an ambulance. He gave his location as the corner where the payphone was located. I asked him if he could tell me his appearance so I could be sure the medics could find him. His response: "Look dude, I'll be the only guy on the corner with a pipe wrench in his butt." I couldn't argue with that. I called 911 about 2 cows running around on a street by my parents' neighborhood. 911 operator asked me to describe the animals, and I said, "Lady, I promise you they're the only 2 cows running down the street right here." Then one got hit by a jeep, and I had to clarify that there was now only 1 cow running down the street. My kid worked for animal control. We are eating dinner and 911 dispatch calls him. Some panicked lady had called 911 about an owl in a tree that couldn't fly. It had been sitting in the tree for a half hour not moving. Of course it was just before dusk and the owl was just waiting for dark so it could go hunt for dinner. Then there was the call about the one-legged duck at the park. Edit to at, he actually went to the park to make sure the duck wasn't injured, but realized after 15 minutes how silly he looked chasing after this one-legged duck that was outrunning him. My late aunt once called 911 because my uncle wouldn't change the fan that was blowing on her because it was a small community in any Michigan. The police laughed and came out and changed the fan. Not 911, but worked for animal control dispatch in a tourist town during my senior year in HS. Got a call from a lady that had called 911 previously and was told to call our number. Picked up the phone to what sounded like a whole car of very panicked people all yelling at once. After asking what was wrong several times, I finally heard someone yell a deer. "There's a deer in somebody's yard. Y'all gotta come pick it up." Thinking it was a dead deer / roadkill, I said an animal control officer would come pick up the body soon. And a kid in the background starts bawling saying the officer was gonna kill it. So I paused for a second and asked, "Is the deer alive? What is it doing?" Someone far away from the phone yelled, "It's just sitting there in the yard." So I said, "Yeah, this is Texas. He lives there. Just don't touch him or get too close and y'all will be okay." Literally not even 5 minutes later we got a call from another tourist about a deer chasing a family after they tried to take a selfie with it. To this day I'm still not sure if it was the same family, but wow, I hope it was. My mom was a 911 operator in the SF Bay Area in the 80s and 90s. I asked her to tell me a story to pass along. So here it is. I got a 911 call and I couldn't understand the caller. He was slurring his words. I knew he was calling from a bar, so I asked if he'd been drinking, and after asking many times I was able to determine that he wanted the police, not an ambulance. He wanted to file assault charges because a woman pulled his tongue. I asked, "How was she able to pull your tongue?" And he said, "Because I stuck it out at her." I had to keep muting the call because I was laughing so hard. Apparently my supervisor went on to play this call in seminars for years and always got a ton of laughter. My department dispatches our area's animal control after hours. Once received a call from a guy freaking out because he caught a possum in his house. I asked him which room he was able to confine the animal, and he didn't tell me which room, but said he trapped it in a microwave. I had many questions. Edit. Thank you everyone. I rarely comment on anything and didn't expect this. First time getting an award too. Edit 2. This is insane to me. Thank you guys so much. I've been dispatching for 10 years now and have plenty of stories if anyone wants more. This one is just my wife's favorite story, so I figured people would enjoy it. At a long-term care facility I worked at, one of our residents called 911 with the phone in her room because she didn't get ketchup with her lunch. Not kidding. The sheriff's office called back to let the nurses know what she'd done while I was standing right there. I've never laughed so hard at work. A nurse here. I've had multiple patients call 911 from inside the earth for various reasons. Slights and deficiencies. Imagined and real. Examples. 1. Gentleman calls 911 from a room in the ER to tell the dispatcher that the doctor didn't believe his story about how the bottle of shampoo ended up in his rectum. He reported feeling, quote, disrespected. To an elderly, very confused woman called the police to report that we'd removed her bobby pins, thus letting her hair down. In the course of preparing her for a court scan of her head, now her hair was a mess. 3. An individual well known to my institution would regularly call 911 to request ambulance transport from the lobby of the ER if directed there for triage, rather than being taken directly to a room. He'd also call 911 and request an ambulance to retrieve him as soon as he was discharged, usually to take him to a different hospital. 4. A very drunk woman called 911 from the bathroom of the ER to report being kidnapped from the party she'd been attending. Kidnapped by M's because she'd fallen into a window and sliced her scalp open. My favorite. 5. Pain management is a tricky situation, particularly with people who have a recorded history within my hospital system of frequent visits and aggressive medication seeking behaviors. I'm not talking about actual chronic pain patients. I'm talking about people who legitimately come to the ER to get that one drug. It starts with D. I forget what it is, but my boyfriend said it's the only thing that helps this kind of pain. Dilaudid. It's always Dilaudid. Anyway, a patient had wheedled and cajoled and tried to get more pain medication from one of our doctors. If there's no diagnosable problem, it's often sticky territory to keep getting forth opioids for pain. So she was going to be discharged. She jammed the door to the exam room shut by stuffing coins in the door frame and barricading the stretcher against the door, and proceeded to rip the sharps container off the wall. Nurses sometimes put empty or partially empty medication vials in the in-room sharps containers before the security personnel could enter the room. She'd called 911 herself, complaining that staff's lack of care had led her to this event, and she'd gotten the needle stick and wanted to press charges. I used to do overnight security and have had to call 911 several times. My favorite was a gentleman who was obviously on something. Jittery, touching his face a lot, couldn't sit still. He tried to break into a house next to our campus, so I dialed 911 right then. As I'm giving them a description of what he is wearing, he starts stripping his clothes off, running across our campus. So I have to tell the 911 operator, yeah, he butt naked in the middle of street, laying down. I think he's doing the worm. We lost the guy on cameras. No clue where he is. 5 cop cars show up and they round up the only guy in our area with no shoes or a shirt. We went outside to give the cops a statement, and the guy is trying to convince the police that he is the one who called them to report someone stealing his shoes. The cops don't buy it for a second, but they let him go, and he just runs off into the night. Barefoot, no shirt. I'm not sure if this is true, but I read about an old lady who called 911 because a ghost was in her house. She was a sweet woman who apparently made calls often. So the officers showed up and pretended to arrest the ghost so she would feel better. There was a period of time where a nice, crazy, probably dementia, old lady got my work number and thought I was the power company. She would call every few weeks to complain about stuff, and I would tell her she had the wrong number nicely and hang up. One day, I decided to just keep working and occasionally just make conversation continuing noises into the phone. Hum. Yeah. Oh, comma, MMM. That kind of thing. Whenever she paused, I think she was on the line for like 45 minutes. At the end she thanked me profusely and seemed very happy. I think she just needed someone to talk to. It kind of makes me sad. Not an operator, but one time I went to a local library to do work as my home was filled with loud guests. In there for a couple hours and I saw I had 25 minutes left. So I packed all my stuff up and brought it to the bathroom so I could take a shit, not leave my stuff unattended, and they immediately just leave. Y'all, they locked me in. The librarians thought I left. The whole place was empty and dark. I walked right out the front door, which was locked, and triggered the alarm. Now, not to throw race into it, but I'm a big Latino man in a very white and upper class part of my state. So there was a real sense of fear I had, lol. I didn't want to be caught driving away from this scene in case any Karens were peeping out their windows. I had to call the cops on myself and explain that I got locked in the library while taking a shit and the operator is dying. Cops show up and one of them goes, "So you like breaking in and taking shits, huh?" I went white as a ghost and started immediately bumbling my words. They brought the whole department out because they thought it was the funniest shit. Thankfully they were cool and just laughed at my dumbness. Not the operator, but told by an operator friend of mine. Woman calls up to allege that her car has been sexually soiled by a car washer. She had left her car with a valet service while she was shopping, picked it up, and drove it home before she noticed a white mark on her passenger seat. She's convinced it was spunk, so she calls the police to report it. Operator asked if she had complained to the company, which she had. They had advised her that the soap they use for fabrics sometimes leaves a mark when it dries, and if she just gives it a quick rub, it will go. She then tells the operator that she knows the company is lying because she put her finger on it and then tasted it, and it was definitely spunk, and she knows very well what spunk tastes like. Somehow the operator convinced her to complain further to the valeting company and ended the call before falling off his chair laughing. I was the caller. My deck had a couple unsafe spots. Normally I avoided them just fine, but on this night, it had snowed. I stepped outside for just a minute because snow is very rare here. In doing so, I forgot about the unsafe spots. I stepped on one and my leg dropped through. As I fell, the boards on either side of my leg bent, but then retracted. The hole was smaller than my knee now. I couldn't get out. My girlfriend got me a coat to sit on because my butt was already starting to get cold, and we called 911. Fortunately, I live so close to the fire department. They were there in less than 3 minutes. I live so close. Had I Wilhelm screamed as I fell, they'd have likely heard me and arrived even faster. But 4 super strong firemen couldn't pull me out either. And I will add to that I think the first half of this sentence would be fairly humorous out of context. Anyway, one of them went to get a chainsaw out of the fire truck, and while we waited, I started singing The Pit from Parks and Rec, and they all joined in with me, and we had a good laugh about my situation. Other than having a sore, purple leg for a few days, I was fine. I bought them all coffee a few days later. Super fun guys. 10/10ths. Would definitely be rescued by them again. My so is an EMT and has many hilarious stories. The one she loves to share is, she was responding to a frequent flyer they call a lot, who was basically given the choice to ride with them to the hospital or go to jail for the abuse of calling 911 again. This patient was wearing a robe. They brought him to the hospital and he's drunk as always. When she does the call in for the hospital asks if the guy is wearing a blue robe. She says he is. You've never heard such displeasure in a person's voice. When the hospital replied, "We will be happy to see you when you get here." So they get to the hospital and put the guy in a room. My so goes to check the guy in while her partner stays in the room with the guy. The nurse was upset and said, "Oh no, I've heard about this guy. I've worked here so long and never seen him." My so goes back into the room and the guy is walking out of the bathroom and his robe is wide open. She then learned he was not wearing any underwear. The nurse came in, saw the guy, threw her hands up in the air, and walked out without saying anything. I was a relay operator for the deaf, hard of hearing, and speech disabled. Was instructed to call 911 because a guy left his cardigan at the doctor's office. Fair play to him. The doctor's answering machine outgoing message, which I faithfully relayed to him, did indeed say, "If this is an emergency, dial 911, close bracket." I worked the jail, not 911, or anything related to that. Wholly distinct from the other agencies in the county. Some guy called about 2 AM flipping the duck out because his meth batch smelled funny, and wanted the fire department. But no cops. I got an address out of him after a ridiculous runaround, and sent it over to the dispatch people across town. They didn't send cops. He was in the county. They sent deputies, and the fire department, and the D, and the hazmat team. And he got to come visit and then go spend an ungodly amount of time with the state document. I think he got 50 plus years. The house property he was renting was demolished and is a hazardous area now because he was making so much meth and I think explosives. Please subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed this video and if you want to see more of Reddit universe.